Welcome everybody to our second webinar of the three-part webinar series on relationship violence. We're so glad you are here, and thank you to FEZANA and the Welfare Committee in FEZANA for helping us. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce our speakers. Our first speaker is Diana Barucha. Diana is an advocate for intimate partner violence prevention and works as a therapist, helping young adults heal from trauma and cultivate fulfilling lives and relationships. Our next speaker is Nasha Katra. Nasha is a licensed clinical social worker specializing in trauma recovery, helping intuitive, creative, and sensitive individuals navigate the challenges of trauma, birth, loss, and transformative life transitions. And finally, but certainly not least, Nawaz Merchant is the author of historical mystery novels and serves as the vice president of ZAGNY. She has supported many critical assistance requests from the Zoroastrian community since 2006, which is a long time. That was when I was born. Not to make you feel old, but. And then, hi everybody, I am Mahtab. I'm the moderator. I'm a student at Rice University studying policy and neuroscience, and I'm an advocate of teen dating violence. All right, so this session, as you may know, is going to focus a bit on sharing of experiences. So we have a few case studies that will be shared. And then we also want you guys to personally explore. So through that exploration of yourself, we're going to provide you with a lot of tools and resources for you to get to know yourself better and the way that your relationships work, your relationship styles, and your needs within those relationships. And hopefully by the time this webinar is done, you'll leave with a support system in mind, should you ever need a support system, as well as things to look out for when you're in a relationship. As a reminder, it's part of a three-part webinar series. So the first, which has an available recording, was over relationship violence and the basics. You are at the second. And the third, which is going to be the end of this month, is an interactive workshop where we'll work through several situations. And so without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Nasha to introduce the love languages.
Hi, everyone. So we're going to start with something that seems kind of light and fun, but it can actually tell us a lot about how we connect in our relationships. So love languages are the different ways people give and receive love. And knowing your love language helps you ask for what you need and understand what you need, what your partner might need. It can also show you when something's missing or off in a relationship. So I'm going to paste the link for the quiz in the chat, and everyone can go ahead and click it and take the quiz to kind of feel into what their love language is. And then we'll do a little poll after we get our results to kind of compare.
Thank you, Nasha. So everybody click on that link. It's only 30 questions and it's super simple. Take that quiz. I will also be taking the quiz. All right, how close are we to finishing? Slightly close? Almost done? Completely done?
About halfway, just over halfway.
Okay. What about now?
Yes, I'm done. Are the others?
Anyone?
You can like raise a hand if you still need time, maybe.
A good idea. Okay. Need a little more time. All good. Okay, hopefully we're done. If not, no worries, take your time, but we're just gonna put a poll up for everybody. And so if you can select the top love language that you got, what makes you feel special? What makes you feel loved?
Do you see the poll?
Yes. You're getting a bit of acts of service, some quality time, some words of affirmation. Half still need to respond. All right, we'll give 30 more seconds and then we'll end the poll. We've got quite a bit of variety. a very, very evident leader, but
Yeah, quality time is for sure the leader right now.
Yeah, so knowing your love language can be really helpful because if, for example, yours is quality time and your partner never has like time to spend with you, or if it's words of affirmation, but you don't really get that much like verbal encouragement or get put down even, you're more likely to feel unseen or unloved, and you can kind of identify that as not great in your relationship.
yes. Thank you, Nasha. So now that you know sort of what your love language is, I'm going to pass it off to Diana to talk about some of the values you might hold in a relationship.
All right, thank you. So this one's kind of along similar lines, but more about how do we know sort of the person we want to be and what we need to be able to be in our relationships to feel satisfied with them. So if you think of values as sort of like a compass for how you want to be in your relationships, how you want to treat others, and how you want to be able to treat yourself. That's what we're sort of thinking about. So I believe I copied the link into the chat, a values list of 15 values. And so let's explore together. If you want to look it over, and once you've narrowed it down to maybe 2 or 3 values, if you want to just type them into the chat, what are your top 2 or 3 values in relationships? And we can kind of see where everybody's at. So let's give it maybe like 5 minutes.
Yeah, this is difficult.
Yeah, and some of them, can kind of seem similar to others. But you can always look this over later on for the purposes of the recording. We could just do the top 2, maybe. So I can start, type mine in. Nasha, ours is the same. So I see a theme. Authenticity is big for a lot of people here. Trustworthiness, curiosity.
And if you don't feel comfortable sending it to everyone, feel free to send it to one specific person, and then that person can just say the traits and not your name.
So it's helpful to know values, before you're in a relationship, while you're in a relationship, even thinking about, family values, friendships. I just love values sort of sorting exercises because I think it can be really grounding and guiding in how we are with each other.
100%. And I think in tangent with love languages, they can really help you think of what makes you feel good. Like when you're in a relationship, when you put those two together, really complement each other. Okay, so you have that link and you can access that document at any point. If you want to share it with someone, feel free to do so as well. So we have now sort of finished one section of our session today, and that was trying to give you the tools to understand what you want in a relationship or the way that relationships can make you feel good. Now we're going to take a bit of a turn and we're going to go into a few stories, a few vignettes of abusive, unhealthy relationships. And we're going to talk about red flags that were identified, your reaction to the situations that are being talked about, just so that we can get some exposure about things that have actually happened and within our own Zoroastrian community. So we're not immune to it, unfortunately. And so I'd like to give it to Nawaz Merchant, who will be going over these vignettes. You're on mute.
Yeah. Hi, thanks, Mahtab. So I've been associated with a number of situations and tried to offer support in many different ways. These are all real situations, case studies. I have deliberately altered the details to protect the individuals, but these all happened within the last 20 years. So the first one I'm going to talk about is a 1 year relationship. It was a very short relationship. So this friend, I'm going to just call them all my friends. This friend lived in the UK. She had actually migrated to England, leaving a pretty good job in the US in order to marry a Zoroastrian man. Um, Almost immediately, the relationship deteriorated, almost immediately after getting married. Her new husband was a vegetarian and she was not. So eating out at that time became an issue. And soon he controlled when my friend ate, slept, woke up, and even showered. He didn't want her to unpack her linen, the boxes that she had brought, because there was very little space in their small apartment. He objected to her phone calls because they disturbed his TV time. He demanded that she work out 3 times a week for her own health and to lose weight. And when she protested and rebelled and argued and tried to just do her own thing, he became quite angry. Then slowly the violence became physical. Finally, in an argument, he struck her, causing her to fall and hit her head. And she lost it. She called the police and reported the incident, but she did not press charges. It just felt very embarrassing to her. Um, she had kept her family aware of her difficulties, and her parents and siblings supported her. They spent time with her on the phone. They gave her encouragement. They suggested productive ways to communicate her needs. But all these efforts pretty much failed. And when none of them worked, that support gave her the confidence to move out, to live separately, and ultimately file for divorce. Today, she is happily remarried in a secure relationship. And her marriage pretty much just lasted a couple months over a year. So I'd like to suggest that Diana and Nasha maybe talk a little bit about this small vignette. I know there's very little information here, but there's probably enough for us to read and learn from this situation.
Thank you for sharing that story and for everyone listening to that story. I think something good to reflect on is just what red flags were there and noticing how the problematic things just kept kind of building up and increasing in intensity. So maybe even in the chat, if you feel comfortable, kind of writing in from what you remember, what red flags that you noticed. Mhm. Yeah, so Kimia said my way or the highway. Yeah, so lots of aspects of just control when it came to diet, body, working out, space, sharing the home. Hmm.
Yeah, and along those lines of, controlling behaviors, I wanted to share something. It can be a really helpful resource. It's called the Power and Control Wheel. And again, I'm sharing it in the chat. You'll see it under DB. Those are my initials. So on the control wheel, it kind of outlines what does power and control look like within the context of a relationship like this. And the language here is gendered, but these kind of power control dynamics happen between people of any genders. So what you'll see here is, using emotional abuse. It sounded like in this vignette, he was kind of putting her down around her weight and how she looked. He was definitely sort of isolating her by telling her not to talk to people on the phone. He was sort of acting like the master of the castle there, telling her, what she should and should not be doing. And definitely using coercion through the use of physical violence towards the end of that story. And this whole, dynamic of power and control is, again, very much indicative of an unhealthy relationship dynamic and tends to kind of get worse over time. There's not a lot of times where people will sort of snap out of that without a lot of intervention.
100%. And I also want to point to the idea of boundaries being crossed here. So the idea that, not only is there power and control, there's obviously a dynamic going on, but individuals have boundaries. So my wanting to work out is a boundary that I have. And so someone shouldn't be able to tell me when to work out or how much to eat. So if you guys want to add a bit about that, what does it mean to cross boundaries? How should you react to that?
Yeah, I think just something really important to note is that in abusive relationships, setting boundaries can feel really hard, almost impossible, because there's so much fear of being hurt or abused. So there could be real consequences for even having small boundaries like violence or manipulation or threats. And so sometimes it could feel safer to not have a boundary. It sounds like in this story, the relationship was a year long, and thankfully, she ultimately was at what got to her breaking point and called the police, which was her big boundary, it sounds, and was able to kind of remove herself. But something we'll go into later, I think we're going to go into the relationship Bill of Rights now, just to think about our boundaries and our rights in our relationships with Diana. And then we'll kind of, after the next vignette, we'll practice some boundaries as well.
Sure. So again, I'm going to drop this link into the chat. So you'll see it next to my initials, DB, the latest one. And that is called the Relationship Bill of Rights. And so this is the idea behind this is that everybody has the right to these things in any relationship that they're in. So for example, the right to make my own decisions, the right to spend time with my family and friends as much as I want to, the right to not be pressured into doing things I don't feel like doing, to feel good about myself, to be respected if I want to end the relationship. So these are all key rights that we all have. And we can talk more about potentially like what rights maybe were violated in the next story.
100%. And I think sometimes to us, especially if we haven't been in an abusive relationship, it feels like we can say, oh, it's obvious that's a right that we have. But once we enter relationships, it becomes difficult to make those decisions, especially if they're unhealthy to begin with and we don't recognize the signs from the very, very start. And we only recognize them when they escalate. And so things like I have the right to take time for myself is really important because sometimes when you're in a relationship and your partner wants all your time, it can feel like that's not abusive. But if they don't let you have that time, then that is definitely a sign of an unhealthy relationship. So do take a moment to read through that whenever you have a chance or right now and really think about what that means in your specific context. Navazanti, would you like to go to the next one? Next vignette?
Yeah, happy to. Can I, at this point, just ask the question, what are good ways to support a family member that is going through a difficult situation in the marriage? We don't want to be the cause of a breakup, but you start to see things going south. Maybe Nasha and Diana can just talk to what are appropriate ways to support a family member.
Yeah, I can start a little bit. So I think, meeting people where they're at with how are they feeling about what is happening, I think is very important. Like validating their experience as being important, because I think when you're in that sort of a relationship, usually what happens is that the other partner, the more abusive partner's feelings and needs kind of get prioritized in order to keep the peace, lower the amount of conflict, kind of keep things safer. So it can be really, really helpful just to say, like, I see how, sad you are about this and how hurt you feel about what's going on right now. And I'm so sorry to see you hurting this way. Just showing that you really care about them.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think the experience can be so isolating. So making sure to just kind of continue to show up in their lives, right? Invite them to places, call them, even if you know they're going through this thing. And maybe sometimes having too blunt of a reflection can kind of push folks away or isolate them more if they want to keep their partner safe. Um, so sometimes kind of gently, more gently, kind of doing what Diana said, kind of reflecting on how they seem or how they're feeling in those relationships or moments.
Thank you for those. So let me do a second case study. This was a 10-year relationship that I'm going to talk about. My second friend was in Canada. Her husband was earning about 3 times her salary. So they had agreed beforehand, before, they got engaged even, that they would maintain separate savings accounts and kind of keep their finances separate. Now, she was an admin assistant, but she had agreed to split all the expenses with him. And as they got married, and in the next couple of years, he did not add her name, obviously, to any of his bank accounts, but not even to the title of their home, even though she was paying half the mortgage. And when they had a daughter, he really rarely paid for what the child needed. So my friend ended up buying whatever the child needed, right? Since my friend's health was quite poor, her physician advised her not to have a second child. But her husband really wanted a son, and he pressured her relentlessly for sex, regardless of her health or whether she was exhausted. So, despite the risk to her life, she had a second child, another daughter. And her husband continued to belittle and demean her. He demanded that she cook every morning because he would not eat stale food. That's what he called it. And she woke up every day at 5 a.m. and got the food done and then went to work. And over time, she lost weight and she shrank to about 100 pounds, which made her parents deeply concerned. Finally, one night, to escape sexual abuse, she left at 2 a.m. in her nightclothes and went to a nearby cousin's house. Her husband did not let her take her children, who were crying and screaming, but it took her 10 years, to get to this point. And it took her 4 years after that to establish that she was a capable mother and to gain custody of her children. This happened a while ago, and today she's happily remarried, and her children are adults and have a strong relationship with her. So this is a pretty traumatic example. And I'd like to talk a little bit about, this is difficult even here for us, but how would our therapists here, our counselors, respond to this vignette, this example, and what can we learn from this, and how do we deal with this?
Before we give any answers, I do want to let everyone know in the audience that it is absolutely okay to step away if you need to at any point in time. And if you don't want to leave the meeting, you can certainly turn down your volume so you can't hear us. And, you know, take that time for yourself if you need to take that moment. Diana, Nasha?
Yeah, so again, I think starting with compassion for what they're going through is incredibly important. Validating their experiences, sort of allowing them to feel as safe as possible with you by doing that is very, very important. And again, when you refer to the Relationship Bill of Rights, I put it in the chat earlier, 1227 under DB. This person, she had a right to feel safe. She had a right to change her mind. She had a right to not be pressured into doing things. And, starting with a sense of compassion for what they're going through, and then maybe even saying that to them, like, it's not okay that you were pressured into doing something that you didn't want to do. And you said directly to them that you didn't want to do that. I don't know. What do you think, Nasha?
Yeah, I agree. And I think things also get trickier when there's kids involved, right? Because there's a different kind of like attachment. But I think even going back to the power and control wheel, um, you shared kind of really looking at it and seeing like, yes, there was intimidation, kind of some economic abuse. It seemed like there was using children,
Mm-hmm.
coercing, like intimacy, using isolation. And I'm curious about what ultimately were her supports and like in the end, how did she get out?
Yeah, I think essentially there was marital rape involved here, right? That's what I'm alluding to. So unable to tolerate this, she left the house, even though there were children. Obviously, they had woken up, they were crying at the time. So this was a crisis point. And the fact that there was somebody nearby that she could go to, she left her cousin's house. I don't know if that was the next street or, the next block over, but she's literally in her night clothes, getting out of this house. And it must have been incredibly traumatic for her to leave her children. But what would cause her to leave her children is she just wasn't safe in staying. And after this, knowing that the children would feel betrayed, right? That was probably one of the hardest parts for her. But she persevered and took legal action. And ultimately, in 4 years, it took that long for her to get her children because she had to prove that she could financially support them and that she was a responsible person. I'm skipping over lots of unpleasant details here to protect the identity of the people. But this was a difficult situation for everyone, her family, but for her, incredibly strong woman. And the fact that she was able to recover those children to, raise them and that they are now happy, functioning adults, that is just testament to her strength and her courage.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It sounds like um, she kind of met that breaking point and then just kind of fought from there, and it shows her resilience and also just deep like commitment and love to herself and her children. Um, Yeah, so as we can see in both the first one, yeah, and the first one was 1 year long. The second one showcased a 10-year long relationship. So these kind of abusive situations can last a long time or they could be short, but they still have impact, right? And kind of going back to what I was saying earlier around boundaries, it could be really hard to express your boundaries in these relationships because there is so much fear. So now we'll kind of go into a practice. So sometimes just feeling into practicing your boundaries before you're in a relationship or early on can support you in knowing what your boundaries are when you're first starting in a relationship, if it's a new relationship. So even early on in a relationship, for example, really noting how does someone respond if you say no, if you say I need space, do they respect that, or do they push back or guilt trip you or punish you? Right. So noticing those things early on in a relationship can really save a lot of time if you kind of note them as like, no, that doesn't work for me. That's my boundary. Right. So now we're gonna try something together. This next exercise will be about feeling what a yes or no feels like in your body, and build kind of trust in your body, trusting that your body knows when something is off, and listening to that. So it'll be a really short exercise, but I invite everyone to kind of sit comfortably. If you feel safe and comfortable, I invite you to either close your eyes or you could hold a soft gaze at your hands or your legs. And just take a moment to just arrive into your body, feeling the weight of your body in your chair, noticing the ground beneath your feet. Just taking a deep breath in and exhaling slowly, just noticing your body as it is. Now we're going to explore what a yes and no feel like, not in your mind, but in your body. So starting with a yes, I invite you to think of a time you felt a full embodied yes. Maybe it was being around someone who made you feel safe and seen. Or maybe it was saying yes to something exciting like dancing or creating or being in nature. Just let that memory and sensation fill you. Notice where you feel that yes. Is your chest warm? Does your spine lift? Do your hands relax? How is your breath? Just stay with that yes for a moment, letting that feeling of yes expand just a bit more. And now we'll shift into a no. So take a breath and just think of a time someone asked you to do something you didn't want to do. Maybe your body said no, even if you said yes. And let yourself feel that no. Where do you notice it? Is it in your shoulders? Do they tighten? Or maybe you feel it in your stomach or your throat. Just notice what changes in your breath when you went from yes to no. Not judging it, just witnessing it. And now just take another deep breath in, slowly out. Invite you back to the room. Yeah, so just acknowledging that your body has wisdom. It often knows what's right or wrong before your mind does. And practicing this can help you recognize those signals so you can honor them.
Thank you, Nasha. And I think this is really important not only in romantic relationships, but even relationships with community members or family members. The ability to say no is extremely important in setting boundaries. And we have relationships with essentially every individual we ever meet. Even strangers have relationships with us. So it's important to set those boundaries, and a very big way we can do that is saying no. So thank you for that. So the final thing that we'll do before we open the floor for questions or comments, if there are any, is create a support network. So you heard two of these vignettes, two of these stories, and a big part of that was who was near them, who could help them. Maybe it was physical location, maybe it was emotionally. Was it a community? Was it a place? Was it a safe haven? Was it professional resources? And having that network available to you is very important if you ever need support. Most times, hopefully never, it will be about an abusive relationship, but it can also be about, a disagreement with a friend, an argument with a parent, a conflict with a community member, and just being able to reach out to that support system and know that you have that network there is incredibly important, especially if you recognize something is wrong early on. So you can get that support and leave the relationship if needed, remove yourself from that situation if needed, or then try to fix or alter the situation. So if Diana or Nasha or Navaz would like to lead us through creating that support network, what that means, who to think of, where to think of, what to think of.
So I'm going to suggest that people grab a pen and pencil, whichever, and just put themselves in the center of the page and just start writing names down. You know who you're going to call. You know who you spend time with on the phone. You know who's nearby, who's reachable. You know who will give you good counsel. But let's not, don't try to evaluate friendships and all that right now. Just put down everybody's name. Your family, your trusted resources, people that will stand by you, and start throwing them down on the page. You don't have to show this to anyone. This is for you. And I know that probably will miss a half a dozen people and you'll start throwing them on the page later. But just for now, who are the top 5 people that you would call, or just want to gain support from someone who would listen? And who are your trusted people? And I think, if we did this scientifically, you would start creating circles around yourself of people that are closer to you. And then as the concentric circles move outward, you could, put down people who you have relationships with, but they would not be the first person you would call. And I'm going to suggest that, you add your community, you add your local association, people from there, put FEZANA on there. The welfare committee is here for you. Hosi is mentor to me, and Utu, contractor, wonderful friend and mentor to me. And I've known Friaz forever, probably since 2000, 2003 at least. So I know that these are all people you can trust. They do a ton of work that we never hear about, and it's for a reason. We maintain the privilege of the confidence that people have given to us. And like therapists, we maintain those boundaries, and no one will ever hear the names of the individuals. So you can feel confident if there are issues to reach out to FEZANA and your local association and use the resources. So hopefully that's given a few ideas on how to start building this network of your resources, your own network of support. And you'll be surprised. You may start out thinking, oh, there's only a couple of people I would call. Like, who would you wake up? Okay, if there was an issue, you had a flat tire, whatever, it doesn't have to be a relationship problem. Who would you wake up? If you had to wake up somebody, who would you wake up? I find that's a very insightful way to know the depth of the relationships that you have. If you don't mind waking somebody up from a dead sleep, you're close with them. And I think there's more people than you think that wouldn't mind being woke up and would absolutely be furious if you didn't call them. That if you were in trouble or you had a problem and you didn't call them, they would say, "Why the heck didn't you call me? Oh, but it was 1 a.m. So what? Why didn't you call me?" And so write down those people's names and you'll find more and more names to add. I can confidently say that by this evening, you will have found a couple more names to add.
Thank you. So that concludes our part of today's webinar. We'd like to open the floor up to you guys. If you have any questions or comments, we'll wait a few minutes and then you can feel free to contact the speakers separately or myself. So if all of you want to put down your email address in the chat where people can reach you should they want to. And thank you for attending our session today. Our last session of this 3-part series will be on the 26th, another Saturday, and at the same time, the same Zoom ID and the same passcode. And we'll be going over different scenarios and really interactively working through them.
Can anybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, good afternoon. I caught in on the latter part of the conversation, so I just caught the part about the woman that had to leave her home in stress. You know, I think that the core issues, nobody, I mean, it takes a lot to sit down and discuss what's the issues with our relationships, right? You have to first be honest with yourself. So, you know, when you're growing up, so to speak, when you're at that 16 to 18-year-old and you're, you know, trying to find your way out, that's something that you should do introvertly, you know, kind of on your own. Then later on, you set up the more adult, that's worked for me anyway, the more adult relationships, and you try to gain that community of, and to me, diversity is the key. I mean, I understand that we like to have support groups as far as, oh, you know, I have an issue and I'd like to get your viewpoint, and I know you see things pretty much the way I do. So that's a good, how do you say, a support network, as you say. And by the way, I don't know if I'm the only man in the group. I hope not, but and I don't want anybody to, you know, have me come off wrong here, because I want to see our community grow and become fruitful again. And right now, I've been, how do you say, in the periphery, watching and trying to, how do you say, get a foot in, to see if we can't, how do you say again, fortify our community. So one of the topics has got to be the respect for diversity, so that we can bring it to the table and say, okay, now I see your point of view. I don't agree with it, but at least I can see it. You know, a lot of times we try to avoid the issues and the conversations that are uncomfortable, but that would lead to, how do you say, knowing your position in that relationship better. Does that make sense? Anybody?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think, you know, sometimes it can be really hard to talk to whoever is in your support system directly about what's happening. Like you said, you might be trying to figure it out yourself and be unsure. And so other resources are available if you wanted to talk to people who are completely anonymous to you. Like there are a lot of DV hotlines that you can call. And if you're like, is this okay? Is this not okay? You can always feel free to talk to someone on those hotlines who can, you know, give you a little bit of feedback without you having to compromise your anonymity. You know, if that's ever a barrier for you in exploring what's happening for you, I think it's a really great resource that we all have available too.
Yeah, the anonymity I think is important for a lot of, especially women, because it's a difficult area to get the support, again, the strength that you need to stand up and say, all right, look, you know, this hasn't been working, and we need to put on the table why. You know, as I say to people that are looking to get married, I say, look, before you get married, find the tiebreaker. Okay. And what I mean by that is it can be anybody, but it has to be somebody you both agree to and you both trust that the judgments that they will pass are for the best for your family. That is the entire family. And again, it goes back to that circles that you were talking about creating. Who are these people that are important in your life? And if they are, what would you, you know, want to have them included on, and what would you want to be to them? You follow? So you get somebody that, let's say, you know, in a marriage, there's two people usually, okay? And when you have a fundamental disagreement, there's no tiebreaker. There's nobody that you can turn to specifically and say, all right, look, you know, you're kind of like the judge in this in this matter, and we need you to give us. And they're not supposed to, or they don't necessarily have to take a side. You know, you can present your case, and they can say, okay, you both need to be meeting more in the middle ground, or you know, abandon that line of thought and go with this. You know, somebody who you respect their wisdom. Again, they can be even somebody younger that has got a lot of world experience that you feel, hey, you know, they're going to give us a balanced view. Does that make sense? A tiebreaker.
Yeah, I think it just speaks to the idea that, you know, it's always helpful to reach out for support from other people and feel less isolated in what's going on for you. So yeah, it's a really great point. Does anyone else have any other questions or comments?
The only other thing I would ask is I'd love to put my email out there for you guys, but I'm not good with the technology. So I'm going to get together with somebody to figure out that. It'd be great to communicate with you guys. Thank you. Gotta find that on text. Ini yung parang text mo po, no? Malam ito, malam.
So I know this has given us a lot to think about. And these are real case studies, and you know, we can learn from them. I appreciate the tools that we've been enjoying and experiencing here. I enjoyed discovering my love language. I thought it was food, by the way. If you would have asked me before this, taking this test, what's your love language? I would have said food. So it was interesting and revelatory for me to discover. And I hope it was for the rest of you as well. I want to thank Mahtab for putting this session together, and for Diana and Anasha for their insightful comments, and really just showing us how to be good, supportive family members, and also how to deal with problems if we encounter them, and how to learn to find the boundaries that we need and to assert those boundaries. Communication is always hard, especially when there's emotion involved. And so knowing these and having access to these resources feels particularly useful for all of us. Other comments from the group? We know we're almost in the hour and we have a hard stop in a couple of minutes.
If there are no other questions or comments, please do remember that you have the FEZANA Welfare Team to reach out to if you'd like at any point, as well as these three speakers who have put their email addresses in the chat. So you can take a moment to take a picture or write them down. And with that, thank you for attending our second session. Please do come to our third session and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks. Take care all.
Bye now. Oh, there, finally came in. That's our numbers, right? Okay, great.